That looks like that's coming through. Yeah, well, let's. I think it was. I think it was. I think it might have been related to Discord. I'll make sure that this is not the case. Hello, everyone. Again, there we go. Normally, I would be playing some music for you all, but we can't risk the chance of any important part of this broadcast when we save it being scrubbed for copyright stuff. So, apologies. You're just gonna have to hear me talk. Tragically. Hey everybody, hope you're as excited as I am. Have been streaming in a long ass time. This is going to be fun. I'm going to go and see if we can't reconnect to my brother. Hugh, you say something?
Hello.
Okay, I think we're all good now. Because I think for whatever reason it was disconnected from the. Wasn't your fault. Wasn't Discord's fault. Well, now we're getting serious. Sorry for the late start. 10 minutes. Everyone else can file into class. Open up your LaCroix, boys, and let's get going. Okay, so this is the SJ tiled tiled. I'm never sure. I've never heard anyone say it out loud. I'm not sure if that's how it's said. And you need to open up level all starter. Use this to build new levels.tmx. That should come in your mod pack. This is what we use to start all levels off of. And the reason we started off of this file is because we have up here in the upper right are all our layers. Layers are mostly organizational, but still they're important. So you want to make sure that you're working off of the most current version of everything. You can go into, we've provided all of the old level files, and you can, actually I guess I should look at the camera. You can copy paste some stuff, splice stuff, build out, like some of your favorite areas into a whole new level. That's cool, but try and do it built off of this level first. Just a little setup for that. So what do we have going on here? First of all, you'll see that the bottom layer is a layer called walk, which is hidden. Let's go ahead and unhide everything else and then just show that. Maybe we'll get an idea of what we're seeing here. Walk is how the engine sees the game. It's very simple. I mean, it's not how the engine sees the game. The engine sees everything else, but it just seems that in terms of what's passable and what's not. So walk layer is simply tiles you can walk on. So this is usually auto-generated. You only come back to this if you're having trouble and you're playtesting your map and you go, oh no, I'm walking into a wall for no reason. So we're going to leave that. We're going to set it behind us. And now on the bottom layer is map. This is where you're going to lay down the ground tiles. And then on top of maps are two other tile layers that are called traps and props. Traps are for internally what we call flypaper, which is to say railroad tracks, mud, anything that slows the player's movement down in a tank or in a mech. Props are, of course, everything else. The neat part, I shouldn't be getting into this. This is high level stuff. Yet I shouldn't be getting into this yet. The neat thing is you can double stack tiles from props and traps. So if I were to say want to use two different kinds of walls together, which in a couple of places there are good reasons to do so, or overlay buildings on top of elevated train tracks, I can use props and traps together because they're fundamentally the same kind of layer. It's just that we use traps for the flypaper traps. So maps are for your ground tiles, and so you place ground tiles with T all tiles in your tile set. Now let me move my window in so you can actually see when I select. You got a whole mess of different. These are all our different tile sets for different tiles. Now, the number one problem if you set up your map and you play it in the game and it immediately crashes. 9 times out of 10, if it crashes your map, it's because you have an illegal type. You have something that's intended for one of these prop layers sitting on the ground tile layer. That's almost always what happens. The trouble is the editor doesn't throw an exception. So here I'm going to do the wrong thing. And now it's going to spin up because actually it might actually crash. No, it didn't crash this because it just spins up because it needs to load into memory. That looks fine, right? No, it's not fine because it's on the wrong layer. So you can always. So this is another easy test. If you're like, oh no, I placed a prop on the wrong layer. Where is it? Just go through and then flip visibility for the ground tiler, and then if you see any of these props disappear like that, they're on the wrong layer. So 9 times out of 10, if you're having trouble, that's where it is. So. But we're not going to go props yet. We're going to go to T all tiles. Now, the nice thing is this is very fast to iterate within the view here. So right click is to pick up a tile with the paintbrush icon, stamp brush, excuse me, which is B, hotkey B. I never use the hotkeys. Right click. Once you have it selected to pick up something, we're going to clear out that because that'll crash the engine. If we right click and drag, we can select. And so now suddenly, and by the way, we use this black, grid texture, just that's nothingness. It comes out as nothing and it's impassable. But now once we've right click drag, we can get ourselves a lot of just immediately start sketching out a level if we want to. The really nice thing about Tilet is it allows for very very different ways of working very easily. So you might say, oh, maybe I'll just sketch out some buildings, or maybe I just want to work from the floor plan and then build up from there. I've made a lot of levels basically every which way. So I can just sketch this out and be like, oh no, then you come around the corner like. But no, I actually don't want to have this thing be a path. I just want to have a big long room. Again, right-click, drag. Excuse me. Let's just drink some carbonated water on a long talkie stream and then burp the whole time. Do it again. It's useless. So right-click, drag. Right-click, drag to select those. And now we're going to hold down Shift and then hold it across. Shift, drag, and then left-click to place that. Left-click. There we go. You can really, and so now, like, oh no, this is not what I wanted to do at all. I could just erase it out because I'm grabbing this. And so the same functionality works in this little tool area. So you can sort of left click drag to select more than one. And now with shift drag, now I'm dragging out a road. And now I can select very quickly. Let's actually go ahead and move that over here. Yeah. Left click drag, and now I've selected all of those. What Hugh really liked to do that I caught him, the sneak, a lot on his streams, is that instead of having to go back over to this palette for doing like road or ground tile work, he would grab a bunch of these tiles, so select basically the whole palette, and then stick it out, and now you've got a little like palette in the world. So as I'm working on it, I can just grab right here, keep painting, let's put this right over here. You get the picture. It's funny because immediately I'm already starting to just like actually lay something out, but that's a little premature. We need to walk you through all the good stuff. So that's the ground tile layer. All of your ground tiles that you can paint are in this tile set. Everything in the game. There's actually a fairly limited array. At the very end, there are a couple of, actually not at the very end. These are still just normal ground tiles, even though they're used, very specifically in the tutorial set. But the very last tile, the objective marker tile, is a special tile, and we'll get to that. In fact, if I actually not hide, but show the next layer over top, so you've got maps. The map layer is only for the ground tiles. Traps are for flypaper, which is to say train tracks and mud. Props are for the rest of the actual 3D geometry stuff. And then objectives is a special sort of tagging layer that you only place. You may want to move your face off the bottom left corner of the palette for that. Yeah, I thought about it. Oh, right, because I'm actually showing you. So this is objective, right? This guy right here. It's the only one that you use on this layer, which is called objectives. And the cool thing is earlier on in the game when we said, oh, it's just gonna be all about these orbital guns, and orbital guns were hard coded as objectives. Then we said, well, especially for campaign maps, that would actually probably be pretty nice to turn other things into objectives. So now that's how it works. So this can be, depending on what kind of map you're making, right? This could be an objective or not an objective. It's all about what is marked as an objective on the objective layer. So now the orbital gun is not an objective, and we'll go to the cars palette and just make sure you're on the right layer whenever you're painting stuff. If things are acting weird, it's probably because you're not on the right layer. But now we'll put down these two cars, and then we'll go back. We'll select the objective layer. Go back to T all tiles, and now select objective. And now these cars are now marked as the objective, and they'll have a little, skull and laurel pointer to this. Yeah, you just designate it. Now, best practices, like if you remember Metal Health, early on, the very first version of Metal Health, we had every single tile of that house designated as an objective tile. That ends up looking very gross and cluttered. So if you want to say designate a train or something like that, designate a couple of those specific train cars as objectives. Just be judicious. It tends to look pretty bad if you mark a bunch of these, because every single tile gets a little pointer on top of it, and it just looks junky. So keep that in mind. But that's how the objective layer works. So that's how you mark objectives. So moving back up, so before we keep getting bogged down, props are where you put the props, traps are where you put mud and train tracks, objectives are where you mark objectives layers. And now we get to player 0. Player 0 is, and I'm glad we're getting to this because there's often a funny, I haven't turned, okay, there we go. There's sometimes a little bug where stuff that's on the object layer will disappear, and you just have to close the map and reopen it, but that's not actually showing up for us. Draw your attention briefly to these layers. For starters, I would also point out that at the top you have an opacity control, which is kind of nice. You can fade in and out partially your whatever layer you want, so you can keep things clean. But I'll point out that you have these little blue grid icons for the first several layers, and then the rest are these mushy purple icons, which is to say it's a fundamentally different type. The blue icons are tile layers, and then all these purple icons are objects. And objects, in the parlance of the editor, are simply any vehicle in the game, and then anything that's not a tile. And by that I mean smaller objects that aren't a full-size tile in the game. Are what we call minis or scenery. So we're just going to go ahead and go up to scenery because we can talk about this. Well, no, hold on. Let's stay on player 0 for a second. So now you'll notice that the left-hand side of these controllers are grayed out because we're no longer dealing with tiles. So if you're like, oh, I can't select these props, I want to place more orbital guns. You can't do that because you're on the wrong layer type. So now we're at player 0, we're in object territory, and now we have the little marquee selector tool for grabbing objects. And this is the player object. Now we go to not faction spawners. Yes, sorry, faction spawners. You have to scroll all the way right. Some of these have hidden stuff on the right-hand side. So scroll the right-hand side to on the second tile set, which is faction spawners, and these are the player spawners. You have to have at least one player spawn location, naturally, to start the game, for the map to load properly, and you have to have an exit. So here are both of those things on this map. This is why these things are on the map. You have an objective, which will, in this case, because we've put a gate on this map as well. That's the way the maps work. The gate won't close until the objectives have been met for the map.
If you have more than one player spawn placed on a level, then the player will randomly be spawned each time the level is loaded at one of those player spawn points.
Bingo. So now we're in. Now we're not in selector mode. We're in placement mode. Go to this little insert tile, which is the hotkey is T, but it looks like a little picture. Now I can go ahead and I place. This is only used a couple times, maybe only a couple times in the campaign. But of course, in freelance, we use them on to vary the experience quite a bit. In campaign, only a handful of times do I ever start the player in more than one start position. But see now, every time you start the map, it's either going to be here, here, or here. Very nice. So that's player 0. Player 0 is just where we put just the essentials of the map. Where's the player? Where's the exit? And let's take a look at this exit, Buster. It's a weird guy because we should probably edit this sprite. This is a sprite that dates back to what the exits actually used to look like. Now that's no longer true, but it's a placeholder editor thing. It is representative of how wide the underlying entity is. So in the game's idea, just like how everything else is represented by a little circle, on the ground, or a cylinder, or whatever, you have to picture a cylinder that hits both of these posts. So about yay big. So once the player runs into that cylinder, that map is over. So what's important, and you'll see if you open up the existing game files, the existing map levels, what's important is if you have, so I'll go over to props and I'll just quickly do this to show this is what, see I'm using some easy copy paste. It's really that easy. But if we left this as the exit point for the map, the gate comes down and the player comes rushing over. But if they don't go over here, they'd just be over here and they'd be like, oh, what the hell? I know, because they have to touch this. So in order to make sure that that's how, and there's a debug draw mode we'll get into in the game to make sure that your exits are lined up correctly and there are no gaps. But copy and paste that and then line up those posts, make sure those posts are overlapping, you're good. So for this, basically, yeah, that's good enough. And then another hotkey, Control G, will overlay the grid and turn off the grid. And it's like the Matrix for me now. I just see the grid, so I mean I don't really need the grid. But that's player 0 level or layer. So it's just where you come in and it's where you can exit. So let's move up the list. Fixed spawns, exactly what it says. So if you're doing a campaign level, or for whatever reason, if you want to make a freelance level that has fixed set spawns, they always show up in exactly the same place. This is where you're going to place your spawn points for the enemies. And you will get to what you want to place on that layer by going to the tile sets, and all of these next couple of sets are what those are for, which is spawnless _, loy tank, which is obviously loyalist tank spawning. And so we can go ahead and so okay, we got fixed spawns selected, and here's the nice thing when you're handling objects, Control G to turn on the grid, and then we hold down Control now, and it snaps 2 grid points. So if you want to really get orderly layouts with your guys, with your dudes, hold down Control. So that's going to spawn 6 AT-AXes in that location oriented this way. It'll always spawn it. It's never going to vary it. That's not how we handle. You notice how when you play the freelance game, things vary it up. Well, we handle that with a different set of spawn locations. Rather than specifying exactly what shows up where, we use something else. So I'm going to clear those spawn points and hide fixed spawns. And I'm just going to go to loyalists. Actually, let's just open up one of the existing maps for an example. So if I go to Sintra Necropolis, so huge sprawling level, but now I'll come over to this area and yeah, I'll turn on spacer spawns. So this layer is how the game decides what's going to show up based on, like, when the game decides, okay, you're playing freelance, who's going to show up? Now there are some of the characters that can exclude, like some of the new ones we're adding will only fight loyalists or only fight corporates, but we're assuming one of the normal pilots. So they'll fight any mix of the three factions. So when you choose that map, it says, okay, this time the map is spacers. So it's going to go to this layer, it's going to go to the spacers layer, and it's going to pick, depending on the difficulty level you have selected and all that, it's going to pick some of these spawn points to spawn in as your enemies. So, Hugh, you want to give a brief rundown on what these little weird symbols mean?
Yeah, sure. So there's the different color classifications as well as the shapes. So the way the spawn lists work, it's entirely data-driven. In the game, each spawn list for loyalists, for corvids, spacers, each spawn list has a strength value that's determined by which pilot you choose and how many levels you've played in freelance. And within that, each strength level, there's 3 different lists. I think they're labeled as aggressive, defensive, and passive, but those don't actually mean anything. The red, purple, and blue are just those colors are to demarcate the 3 different lists on the spawners, and then the shapes indicate the type of behavior that the unit inherits when it is spawned there. And so each set of 9, you have 8 arrows in each different direction, and that's showing which direction the vehicle will face on spawn. Any vehicles that spawn from those 8 nodes for each set, if it has an indicated direction, that means it will spawn as stationary. And until it is aggroed, either by direct visual with the player, by an alarm sounding, or by hearing the player or hearing an explosion, it will remain inert. Once a unit has been aggroed, that is where the secondary shape of the spawner comes into play. So the rectangle shape indicates that once aggroed, a unit will pursue infinitely. So even if they lose...
So it has no leash.
Yeah, it has no leash. So that unit, even if it loses contact with the player, it will then roam freely across the entire map. The hemisphere, the semicircle set in the middle, those indicate a long leash, about a screen and a half size, so pretty large patrol area, and that's more if you want to keep units contained in a broad area, but also give them some free reign. Units, if they are in direct contact with the player, will continue pursuing, but if the player breaks contact, that unit will immediately return to an area within its leash that's based on the original spawn point. And then the trapezoid, the last one, indicates a very tight leash, and that's that area is less than the size of a single screen. So that's for things like defending objectives or orbital guns. If you want to make sure that even after being aggroed, they will hold an area, that's what those spawns are for. And in general, and also the middle, the 4 arrows, that means that when the unit is spawned, it spawns in an active state. And then it just depends on what the size of the leash is. So the way we handled a lot of the freelance levels, we tried to demarcate it both by faction as well as by types of units. So in general, in the pre-existing spawn list for each faction, red spawns are fast movers, any units that can rapidly engage, tread bikes, hovercraft, and units that have that we want to actively pressure the player, and we tend to use those. We tend to spawn those more actively in free roaming setups. Purple is normally used for defensive type spawns. So slower units or units that you more want to use to set ambushes for the player. I use them a lot for power suits, for bigger vehicles that have slow refire rates. And then the blue is generally reserved for boss unit spawns and the shield truck spawns. So high value targets for the player. And those tend to either be isolated or given, special locations at various points.
Okay, great. So and I've been trying to scroll around. So just from a high level perspective, we were looking at the infamous spacer balls, right? They have these. Hughes wanted to have each faction, their mentality be reflected with how they spawn. So spacers always spawn in these clusters that are sort of carefully arrayed. And now we'll uncheck spacers. We'll go to corvids. And now, again, feel free to look at any of the existing maps, and you'll see a lot of this stuff. You can peel the layers back on any of the existing maps. You'll see with corvids, true to their nature, they're just kind of scattered over the map, more just at random. And then we'll look at loyalists, and things are not as densely clustered as spacers, but still more orderly and more grouped than the corvids. So, but that's for building freelance. If you just want to make a campaign style, I mean, Hugh, if I'm not mistaken, either spawning system works completely fine in either level set, right? Because there's not really a real distinction. So yeah, when we made careful choices when we were making campaign levels, that there were certain logical conclusions that, like for example, we have a switch in the level metadata file that we'll explain that will randomize the locations of the depots on the map in any of the other depot locations like it does in freelance. We disabled that for the campaign maps because I don't like it when you feel like you get a lucky break because of RNG, right? Oh, finally, I got the laser spawn. I got the laser depot spawning close to me. And any kind of cheesy behavior where a player will feel incentivized to make the game worse for themselves, we wanted to avoid. So the idea that making the game, they could do a dice roll, right? Quit the level, replay the level, quit the level, replay the level until the depots lined up the way we wanted to, or the enemy spawns lined up the way they wanted to randomly. Didn't sound like a lot of fun. So that's why we wanted a set challenge, very low chaos kind of thing, set challenge for the campaign maps. And then in freelance, because it's more about you thinking on your feet, dealing with what gets thrown at you, we have these spawnless style spawns and the depots randomized. But there is no fundamental difference in terms of the structure of the levels and how the game treats them. It's just where they show up and whether or not you get to pick your own loadout in the game. So if you want to make a campaign map or you want to make a freelance map, that has all canned, preset fixed spawning, you absolutely can. There's no trouble there. So we're going to close this out. Don't need to save changes. So that's how spots. I know that's a lot to take in, but that's high level spawning. You have fixed spawns or you have the dynamic spawns. You can mix and match. Shrewd observers will note that there is a fourth faction present in the layers named Focos, which is short for Focalismo, which is the I believe the name of the philosophy as put forth by Che Guevara. Those were like really, really early days figuring out how we're going to do this faction stuff. I mean, it's not a lore update alert, but it's like proto-lore, right? It's stuff that was something that was going to be in the game. And then we're like, whoo, we're already making way too many units for these 3 factions. Maybe we don't bite off a 4th faction. So that was a primordial 4th faction. And I think most of the thoughts for the Focos ended up, and of course, that name, right? We're going to run into some troubles. That thought process probably got folded into the Corvids, more or less. So that's your spawning. And now we've finally gotten up to the fun layers, which is scenery, lights, and civilians. And frankly, I also like to point out when things get a little tough or you feel like you're maybe getting overwhelmed in the process of building your own map, these levels are pretty much, or these layers are pretty much organized in terms of what's important. The icing is on the top. The stuff that is not really essential but can help your map look nice is at the very top. And then, it kind of descends down in orders of importance. So let's take a look at the fun stuff. So scenery and lights are technically the same type of layers. They're just for what we call minis, which are just small props. Small props are different from tiles. In tiles, so let's go and place a couple tiles so we can see what we're talking about. So I'm going to go down to containers because no good. I'm going to show you a quick trick. I'm going to select all these containers, and you say, "But Jack, I don't want to put down a block of these containers. That's not very fun." Well, we'll go up to here and we'll hit the little dice icon, and that's random mode. And now notice that it sort of randomly picks out of the set that I have already selected. So I just sort of grab select, and I can scroll all the way down and then shift click. And now everything in this tile set has a potential chance to be picked, which is great. And now the same old trick applies where I shift click, drag. Yeah, I see gas bar. Ooh, yeah. This is how you make levels really fast, because grab all the buildings, mess them about. They're a lot of fun. So now I shift click, drag, and now I've got this really nice randomized set. And what can often be, and then of course if you don't like what was placed, just click it again and it'll pick something else out of that set. So this is awesome for very quickly for buildings, for forest, for containers, for anything, or car crashes, right? So you go into cars, and I'm just going to go ahead, and if you watched me stream development of the game, you saw me do this a lot, where I will pick every 4th tile, which means it's the same orientation, right? They're all facing the same direction. So if you want to go in and you felt like you've done too much work, like hand picking out, like, oh, I'm setting up a parking lot or whatever, but now you turn on random, and now you just shift click, and now it looks like, hey, look, now see, look, we've already set up something where with a little bit more dressing, this looks like a place, this looks like an area that exists. So that's the magic of this editor. You get a couple of these tricks under your belt, and you can build very quickly, no problem. So yeah, that's the randomized brush, a very, very important feature. But then we're going to go up to, so okay, I'll keep this rolling. We'll go back to T-all tiles. Now remember, most of your problems are going to come from placing a prop onto the ground tile. Just don't do it. So when we go down to map, make sure we keep ourselves in that headspace and go down to T_all tiles. You guys are very good at selling tile. It's a great editor, no question.
You should probably show how easy it is to export a level into the game, and also make sure that you didn't break the level.
Yes, exactly. Put my money where my mouth is and make sure that this is actually working out the way I say it is.
The other thing that's really nice with our implementation of tiled with our game is that we can live update level changes while you're running the game, while you're running that level.
Yeah.
And Jack will show you that in a second.
Yep. This is a huge, so to really close the loop on, because there are a couple of things that don't quite. It's mostly what you see, what you get editing, but there are a couple of things that don't work quite that way, and so it's really good to, and especially for playtesting, it's really good to just close the loop as far as that goes. So Hugh's right. So as we see here, let's add ourselves at least one enemy here. Da, 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 da. I'm going to go to fixed spawns. So click on fixed spawns, and then we're going to go to loyalist, tanks. I love the AdAxe. It's one of my favorite designs. I designed it, but also in terms of how Hugh built it. Hugh balanced basically all these units. But in terms of how they end up, so now again, because we're in the purple area, it's not blue tiles, which is props and stuff. Now we're up into purple object zone. So now I have to use these right hand. Now, most of these are not used for us. These shape drawing ones, we didn't make use of it. It's just for object layers. So we go to fixed spawns, we click the one we want, and then and I will hold down Control click to place them in an organized fashion. But so, for example, here, if you haven't been building the game for years at a time, and you say, I don't actually remember how big an AdAxe is. I don't know if these guys are going to be running into each other, right? So, well, we're going to hit Control. First, oops, I should have hit Control S because now I've saved over my save everything or starter level. But whatever, I'll show you another trick that's very good for starting your own new level from scratch.
Two things real quick. One is, always just copy out All Starter if you're making a new map, and then that way,
always make a copy.
Immediately save it under the name of the new thing you want to make. Second of all, if you actually look at all of the vehicle spawners, both the direct spawners and the spawn list spawners, Jack, if you can zoom in real tight on one, you'll notice there's a little semicircle at the bottom, plus a little arrow. That should be center mass for the vehicle spawn.
Yeah. So picture this as a sort of a billboard being placed that's screen oriented. This picture is not where they end up. It's right here is the center of the vehicle where it ends up. So,
and the other thing is that we do a thing in the engine in order to prevent if any units end up getting placed like accidentally inside of buildings or on top of each other. Something we do is that whenever level loads, we agitate the location of the spawns a little bit, so that if you do end up with vehicles kind of multi-stacked near or sort of on top of each other, they'll kind of fan out a little bit. They'll still be uncomfortably tightly packed together, but
they won't be literally on top of each other. Yeah, it's a really nice feature, which, we've all been there. We've all played a game where suddenly some enemy comes at us and there are 2 or 3 of them in the same sort of phasing through each other. So we're going to go in and we're going to save as. Now that we have a little bit of a nomenclature that would be good to be respected for your own custom levels, just so that people moving forward have any idea what they're doing. So level _ is for name for freelance levels, and level _ was a name for a mission level. So just an easy way to tell at a glance whether you're opening a campaign map, which is an level, or level, which is just a freelance level. And further, just to kind of give ourselves, we would round robin through which levels were which faction. So you'll notice the levels have level _ and then a faction name and then some shorthand version of the title. So we're going to say this is, I'm going to do it. I love making campaign levels, so we're just going to go ahead and say this is level tutorial, level building tutorial. But now I'm going to export it, and unlike what Hugh probably wants me to do, I'm not going to walk you through adding your own map to the game. That's a lot of work for me right now, a lot of mental overhead. I'm not going to do it. It's beyond the purview of the 101 class, okay? Let's go ahead and find my Steam library again.
You just export it to the game, and then you hit F1 and go to levels, and then you find the name of your level and hit spawn.
Yeah, but I don't. I like having the all the loadout stuff set up for me. That's what I like.
Mm.
Listen to this guy. Listen to this guy.
I was just saying.
Is this your
it's
stream?
easy.
Are you
it's
teaching
easy
people on
for
your
people.
stream? You want to start on your stream? I'll heckle you on your stream. How about that? How about you teach people on your stream? This guy.
That would require me putting a shirt on.
Unbelievable. Hey, maybe you get a lot more Twitch followers in this day and age. Know what I'm saying?
Late night Brigador stream.
Sexual. Now I've stopped thinking, so I'm going to think about Steam Library. Brigador. Okay, so now this is the common, Steam apps. Common Brigador, and all you have to do is go inside assets and levels. Before you unpack and repack and everything else that you have to do for modding, you don't have to do any of that mod readme stuff for doing your own levels. So in this case, let's just overwrite. And it's okay. It's okay to overwrite levels because you can just go back and, it's always good to make a copy, right? And you can redo it yourself. But if you're like, oh no, I've overwritten all of their really good levels with my own terrible levels, bring me back to an unmolested game. Just authenticate your Steam download, and it'll fix your garbage. But I want brain. What do I want? Fly Blackbird. The first proper campaign mission. Hey, Dot there. Yeah, no, Machining Krieger for life. I'm actually sitting here. I have a Archelon Machining Krieger kit on my desk right now. Just saying. Okay, so now we've got Hey, Commander, that's great to hear. Now I'm gonna of course have to change out of my full screen mode, but I will do that momentarily. Windows. This is another aspect that's really great about how the game works. Far be it from me to point this out, but it is pretty great. With windowed mode, and you can just fly right back to it really easily. So we scroll all the way down to Fly Blackbird. We grab our Toro, because you should always have your Toro. Oh, look how we are. We have now, unlike in the original level, which as you know is, by heart, right? In Fly Blackbird, you're supposed to destroy the orbital guns, because, we just tab over to the editor, because on the objectives layer, we've tagged these pair of cars as the objectives, that's all I have to do. But oh no, I didn't like how that played. Maybe we needed to make this a little bit more difficult for the player. Let's do ImWalls. If we go to the ImWall tile sets, and then you can find these HESCO bastions, which are what the military used to build fortifications out of. And now we'll draw that around the car. We'll go to, I'm just messing around, I don't want to have that, oops. I don't want to have this spawn point too close. Save, export again. Select Fly Blackbird again. Now that I've exported again, all I have to do is I go to F1 and I go to dev mode. So F1 is your dev console, and then on the first tab, in the first radial button is dev mode. Now with dev mode on, all you have to do is hit F4, and it hot reloads the level for you, which is awesome. Now you'll notice, but my game's not working, it's crashed. Your indie game's not all that. Oh, but it is. You're just in pause mode. So just hit P to unpause yourself. While you're in pause mode, it's cool because teleport still works, which is bound to Q, which is also normally bound to the horn. So that's always good, is when you're in dev mode, just teleport around honking away. So But I didn't get a good sense of that playtest. Let's reload again. So, but this is cool too because, oh, that's not true. Interesting. I was gonna say you should be able to see the different spawn points, but it's a hot reload of the level. It doesn't actually put you back to the start of the level.
It's the same seed, so it re-instances the level using the exact same seed. So if you're in freelance, you don't get a new shuffle of the spawn list. It's everything's the exact same, and it just happens.
And you're in the exact same position.
You're in the exact same position, yes.
Yeah, so you can manually reset yourself to the start location if you want to, but otherwise, it's really good for being like, oh, I just played this part of the level. I played a little firefight. It was maybe too hard. Let's change some of the enemy locations and let's try it again. So F4, reload, P to unpause. Now I just walk over here. Luckily, a Toro has a monster stomp, so now I've got an exit. And I'll show you how to get our cute little exit signs too. That's a little bit. That's one of those finish, polish pass sort of things. And then, sure enough, we see. Let's go back to our editor. This is how the addexes ended up lined up. And sure enough, just as you described them, it's right where the center. And most things are smaller than, almost all units are smaller than tiles. So even if you use this control-click grid-aligned placement, they're not going to be overlapping, which is really nice. So now we've got our own Brigador level that is fully functional. We can place enemies. We've got props. We've got objectives, we've got our good old orbital guns, and we've got an exit. Now, like I was talking about, this is a good one to have I think it's under miscellaneous. Yes. On the first tab, F1, debug, and then under miscellaneous, there is a draw, where is it? Hitboxes, maybe? Where is it? No, that's not. We don't want hitboxes. There's something for showing the exit size.
Ooh.
Draw scenery hitboxes? No. Text triggers? Nope. Oops. Welcome to. You can get all kinds of great information, but. Prop hitboxes, that's cool. This is a cool way because you can actually see exactly how the engine sees the hitboxes of these objects. And sure enough, it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect. You can swap backup lights. Damn it, this isn't it either. Well, hell, don't I look like a dummy? Anyway, just make sure you have, like as we said, we make sure that our exit objects are going post to post. That'll make sure it covers the whole exit. So if I just walk into here, no problem. Can you walk out into the black, or is it a wall? It is a wall because on the walkability layer, so if we turn on walk layer and turn off map layer, so on the walk, the very lowest layer, that's what says the player can traverse this tile. Nothing else is what defines that.
Jack, it's R_debug exits 1 and 0 to turn on and off.
R_debug exits. Okay.
I think that's one you have to manually type in the console.
Huh. Well, I typed it in R_debug exits. But see, this is exactly what we're talking about. In this case, there's no way that any player can kind of sneak past the exit and make it to the outside the map, but that is a concern when you place the exit. So some of this is just quality of life stuff to make sure you do it right when you're building your map. So we've gotten through all the basics. Now let's get to the gravy. Scenery, lights, civilians. Lights and scenery, same thing. We've got, so scroll all the way down in your tile sets and go down to Mini. And Mini is Minis are tiny, are all the beautiful little things that make these little Brigador levels feel like they're alive. So, and by that I mean trash bags. So hit T or go to this little tiny picture icon to start placing trash bags. You know it. Oh man, there's a recycling bin. There's a composting or trash bin. There's regular garbage bags. There's an old-fashioned, dustbin. There's one of those little transformer boxes that are by the side of the road. There's a planter box.
Citizens of Southern Nombre are very sensitive to their waste recycling.
Yeah, no. I know the Brigador event totally happened on recycling day for like the entire city, and everyone's like, "Why do we run it this way? We have a huge fleet of garbage men that all have to get the garbage at the exact same time. Why don't we just have a schedule?" Everything run better with Great Leader. What can I say? You got your hot dog cart. You got a little grill next to the hot dog cart. You've got a basketball where the hot dog man has been playing. He's been reading the news.
Did you mention holding control for free placement?
Yes. Same as placing for the unit spawns. If I hold down, so Control G, turn on and off the grid, and I'm pretty sure in one of the preference dialogues you've got, you have a grid color, and you can kind of fine tune that for yourself.
So there's a great trick. Like, for example, if you want to place a bunch of light posts at a regular interval, what you do is first find if it's convenient, have them at a set grid distance. So it's like every 3 grids is a light post, and then place all of those. Place your whole chain of 8. And then once you have them placed, and you know they're perfectly evenly spaced between them, then you select all of them, hold control, and then adjust the placement of all 8 of those lampposts to be in the exact position on the map that you want.
Yeah, because you'll find sometimes I'm going to place these parking meters. Parking meters look pretty good right there on the grid, but then we're going to go to... this is a common one for exactly what he was talking about. These little road barrier guys. So the natural thing to want to do is not place these all at a grid. You want to line them all up because they look cool that way. It's cool to smash through them with the tank. So I'm going to Control click. You can click and unclick. It's hard to see the selection marquee there, but Control click to select more than one, or you can drag marquee. So I'm going to Control click all these, Control C, Control V, and now I can kind of eyeball it and then line them up. Well, it's pretty tricky, but you can do it. It's a little tight. Paste. See, now everyone's going to go back through and notice where this kind of stuff was really sloppy on the levels, and you're like, I could do better. You guys spent 6 years and continue to make this game, but you know what? I can do better. And you know what? You can do better, and we'd love to see you do better. Sincerely. So you've got... Now I'm just going to mess them up because Friday's the spice of life. And then I'm going to go back into my tabs, and now, again, we have to make sure you're not in selection mode, but you're in placement mode. And you can place the, alternate angle ones. So you can just build up some really cool little scenes of, oh no, you better believe there are some tire stacks over here. Oh no, there's some, oh no, can't go here. Yeah, there you go. Oh, and it's not Solo Nobre until you get the plastic chairs sitting around. They're playing poker. They love barbecuing. If they're not eating at Ed's, they're making their own barbecue. They're waiting on park benches. Lore alert. There are tons of bus stop related little props in this game. There are no buses. Figured that one out. Yeah, this is exactly what they call environmental storytelling. We did it all over. You can do it too. And you know what? All your stories are going to involve hot dog vendors, because all mine do. That's all I got to say. And you're like, yeah, I want to see this in action. And I'm like, yeah, I do too. So we're going to go back in. Control E to export, overwrite the existing file, or save out our new one. F4, Here we go. Look at this shit.
Put some sweet lights on that, bro. Turn the mood lighting down.
When he's right, he's right. I was gonna save that for the next sentence I was gonna speak, but it's a good thing he reminded me of what I should do.
I say it better.
Oh. Come here.
Also, you can use the global edit the global camera to zoom in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good. That's another special tweak. These other players don't know, but you're gonna know. All right, P. So the game does run a little sort of background audio, and of course, any alert enemies are gonna run around and try and kill you too. So hit P to at least pause the game when you're not in it. It's probably a good idea. Yeah, exactly. It took 5 minutes to set up. 0.5 seconds of knockdown. That's what we did. That's what we did to bring this world to you. This is starting to bother me, of course. So I'm going to go down to the map layer and now right-click. See, again, you got to have your right tool selected because I'm down in the different style of object layer, map layer. The marquee selection no longer works because I'm not handling objects. So I go to the stamp tool again, and now I'm allowed to interact with this stuff. So I'm going to go right-click, drag, just clean up some of this garbage. Not by much, but whatever. And shift drag, or yeah, right-click drag. That's right-click drag, and then right-click drag, and then a shift drag, and then left-click to place again. Super easy. But Hugh's right. What really makes these levels shine is not only putting a lot of this greeble everywhere, but then setting up your lights properly. So you can distinguish the lit minis. Almost none of the props are lit by themselves. We use these mini lits in order to do that. So tab over, and because we're Galactic Brain, there's a mini big category. All right. Which is cool stuff like that and this moisture vaporator or whatever the hell it is. Some, like,
also, a quick note. Technically, these items on these layers, technically it'll work placed on any layer.
Oh, right.
So the name schemes are actually more for an organizational setup.
Yeah.
And that way, so that you can, because oftentimes we would find that we would need to go through and tweak just the lights. And some of these setups, like you can go really, really high density with a lot of these minis in the game, and it doesn't really affect performance.
Yeah.
And so it's good to separate out just purely aesthetic minis with lit minis, because it can be difficult to actually dig in and select pieces that you want if you're in a high density area.
Make sure you get your pallets too. You gotta have lots of industrial pallets, because boy, they love barbecue.
Unless they're on pallets.
Exactly. Oh, I got a forklift now. Look, what are these guys doing in here? I don't know. Watch out.
You got roadside Tony over here. He's just moving your pallets.
So here, you
Nothing
see,
on 'em.
we've already got a little forest scene, just a little grove. Pallet lore. Pallet lore. Thanks, Carl. Hey, welcome, Carl. So everyone give a round of applause to Carl. He is the reason Brigador is still working and not a smoking crater. And we'll have even more languages soon. So very excited. But yeah, let's get to the good stuff. So go to Minilit, tab over to Minilit, and these are the same. And just as Hugh was saying, we're gonna just give ourselves a leg up and not keep on the scenery layer. We're gonna go up to the lights layer. So here's scenery. We're gonna go up to the lights layer, and that's what we're gonna put. The American Italian Anti-Defamation League has been notified. So we go to the lights layer, and here we are going to. This tends to have a very big effect on the kind of essential character of your map. Like if you're trying to do it as the slum shanty town kind of thing, a little more upscale urban, out in the woods, the kinds of lights you use really help sell that. So like these chunky industrial style light posts I really like, but they're chunky and industrial. So
which upcoming patch has full revamp of lights and lighting?
bingo! Look at this guy. He can't stop shilling for his own beautiful game. So Control G to turn back on the grid, and then Control click to get ourselves we're gonna set up an interval. And this looks a little too close together, but of course, let's just pop in and see what the actual like lights in the environment end up looking like, because it'll just save ourselves a lot of trouble. Not bad. Again, Hugh is working on this. Although, if I'm on the staging branch, isn't this the new stuff or not? Or have you added everything?
Some of it is.
So
yeah, that's
more yet to come. This is exciting. So this is a little overlappy. I think it would be a little bit better if just a little bit more space. So I'm going to Control Z and just go back and place them at a little bit more. So just count to yourself 1, 2, 3. Yeah, basically every fourth tile or so. That's fine. 2, 2. Every third, not every fourth. So now I'm going to go back in and Control click to select them. And because, again, the way the grid aligns, it may not be the best thing for setting up for your map, so you can bring it in as close to, say, the road as you need it to be or whatever. Go ahead. Luckily, we have many different angles, so now I can place that. Something I tend to do is not light both sides of the road unless it's a very big road. It just tends to look very cluttered. So 2, 3, 2, 3. Something else I tend to practice as well, and you'll see this in do not accidentally close the level out. No problem, no harm, no foul. I saved. We're gonna just save and export this and then see what it looks like. But I will tell you from experience, you are still building an isometric game, right? So even though this is consistent, which is to say, in this place, the lights are always on the right-hand side of the road here. You could totally do that. Be my guest. It's your map. You do what you want. But when you're making an isometric game and isometric levels, there are things to keep in mind, and one of them is just keeping the visual space. Like here, even reflexively, I'm just like barfing down props. I still gave this amount of distance between, like 4 is certainly comfortable. At least 3 is usually comfortable. 2 is like bare minimum. A tile of 1, and let's just prove this. So I'm going to go to the prop layer. This is technically passable. It's not fun. It doesn't look passable because our view of the world is entirely influenced by what we can see from this camera perspective. So this to us does not look, even though at ground level you're like, yeah, that's like 16 feet across. That's totally passable. That's not how this works in this game. So always be thinking of in front of, behind, and how we privilege the perspective of the player. And we're going to cheat things. So, and by cheat, I mean, this is a theater term. We did theater in high school. Can you imagine us wanting to put on a show? The theater term is cheating out. Cheating out refers to, so I'm talking to the guy next to me, right? And this guy standing right here, and the total normal human impulse is to square up and talk to that person like that. You, as the viewer, are like, what the hell? I'm paying to see this guy talk. This isn't very interesting because he's not showing me much. So cheating out refers to what looks totally doofy in real life, but looks natural, or at least looks fun in theater. But also, this is like, you'll kind of notice some of this stuff seep into games, and certainly it's in movies as well, but just in a different way. But so I'm talking to Guy X or whatever, and most of my body is still towards the audience. So I'm like, hey, dude, what's going on? And if you were talking to me in real life, you'd be like, what's that guy's problem? But on the stage, it's not real life, and so you don't treat it that way. What does this have to do with building levels? Understand that you're always building not real spaces, but places for only the player to see. So in this example, what I would do, and I'm going to go back up to my lights layer, what I would do is not place these. It's such a small road, I would not place these on this side of the street. When I would go back in, I would go back to my mini lit. What I would do, once I find them again, there are many different lighting fixtures. Once it travels to this side of the street, I switch the side of the street it's on. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. And what it does is you just don't have this sort of mental blockage. So when you're, as the player, even as a Toro, even as you've been kind of conditioned after playing the game for quite some time, you're fine running into all kinds of things. But people still kind of habitually will just avoid things. So there's a thing where when you see a pathway for yourself, it's just not. And of course, you can use this against the player to kind of help funnel the player into interesting ways. I'm just making you aware of this as a real thing, so that you can build your levels, with that awareness. But this way, even though the Toro doesn't touch any of these lights, if he's walking down the roadway, he feels very close to them. He's not any closer to them than he is over here. It's just that those big old posts are in front of the camera rather than further down the scene. So keeping that in mind, well, I didn't save properly, or I didn't export properly. Nope. No. Fly Blackbird. F4. It's a subtle thing, but now walking down here as the player, I'm like, ha ha ha, look at me, I'm big king shit. And I don't feel crowded to be on that road. So keeping spacing and keeping a sense of what you're presenting to the player and in what proportion, give them space. Unless you, of course, are very intentionally crowding them. So that's what I do with light posts. Usually only one side of the street, and usually on the far side of the street. So push it to the other side. Don't do the near side again, unless you're trying. Yes, what Carl said. Visual composition plays in a surprising amount. So another quick thing, because these are all fairly small and don't really go much into it, but if we go to, say, the buildings, we'll open this up for questions very shortly. I'll point that out. And we'll do another one of these.
Before you get to that, though, as just the next thing, make sure you go over AutoMapper.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. So we're going to go to the buildings, awesome, many buildings, and do the same trick we did earlier, which is go to make sure we're on props layer, and then turn on randomize. And so now, I'll also show another nice thing, which is the ability to flood fill. So now you have to box things in. So now I can go to the bucket tool, F. Do not click when you see this. It's going to try and fill the entire level. The entire level. Don't do it. Don't click. That's the one. That's like it's one that's maybe you save early and often, because once you start messing around with the flood fill, I guarantee you're going to click when it does that. Unless you have a beef computer, it's still going to be a problem. So, but now it's still, this is with flood fill and randomized selected, and I can just sort of cherry pick my seed of randomized tile placement. What looks good? I'm going to hit click. There, we have this nice. But this is something I would seldom do as a level designer for all the same things that we're talking about. And I'm going to go to this marquee. This is not the object marquee. It's the prop, or the first one, marquee, which you drag. You can drag additively and selectively, so which is really nice. So if I hold down Shift, I can add to a very like scalpel like. Again, this is for tiles, not for objects. These two marquees are next to each other, work very differently. But I'm going to select all this and pull it out and turn off randomizing, because otherwise it just turns into another randomizing set. But just like we were talking about, a 2-grid movement right through here, like say we're, this near adjacent area. 2-grid movement, perfectly fine for the player to navigate. However, with this big block of really tall buildings in the way, this path is not obvious to the player at all. Even with like light posts and like literal signposting that, hey, you can walk here, it's not obvious. So don't do that. If you want to say, okay, this is a walkable area, like pull it all the way out until the camera, it's visible to the camera that this is a pathway. That's what you need to do. So you're constantly thinking about not how would this space be arranged in reality per se, but what makes sense in order to give the player the affordance that they deserve for navigating your space. You want to be comfortable, again, unless you are specifically trying to make them uncomfortable. So if you wanted to point out a couple more things, I'll point out. Well, no, we'll leave some of the other like trick. We have a mini lit _sm, which means small. So mini lit smalls, and these are, you're just going to have to play with them to really kind of get a good sense of them. But they're basically flood fills, and red is very high angle. Purple is a little higher. You can kind of see them in the sprites, but not really well. And then green is like slightly below ground, like pointing straight across. They're really great for enhancing mood and ambiance. So we go to light.
We have a level called level all props that has every asset in the game in it. And so if you just want to look at stuff or see how an object functions, open up that level in Tiled, and then also explore it in the game using the level loader. Yeah. And that way you can see, okay, this is angled this way,
Yeah, you don't have to go through and place every single one of these to get a look at what they look like. Use the exactly. We have as some companies call it, their zoo level. We have a zoo level for those purposes. So I've just placed a couple of these lights. I'm just going to go ahead and rebuild to show it. And this looks pretty good, but it'll look different depending on what weather set you have, which is something else you'll set in the metadata for the level file. We're not going to cover that tonight, but these are other kind of like finishing touches for your level. So we'll go to F1. We're going to go to the fourth tab, which is called packed file. And then in the second field, first is a drop down to get type, which will also work, but I just go to the search field and type weather. And weather is what we call our lighting setups. So now you can pick, and the ones that have an asterisk over them are already loaded. So there's a couple mostly to do with the menu. And there's one for Fly Blackbird, which is the specific lighting information set for that level. That I can just click around, and I can load all these other random ones and see what, especially if they're running freelance, what my level looks like in that lighting condition. So I like this one. I forgot I'm both teleporting and honking my horn. So there you go. You got these nice little flood fills that add a lot of the ambiance to the scene, and you know, city setups look pretty dead unless you throw at least some light, and you can use street lights. You should probably use some combination. Just keep the only real consideration in terms of keeping performance well. Or keeping performance behaving is watch your number of overlapping lights. So if there's a ton of lights overlapping a bunch, and especially moving lights and these other kinds of things, that's going to slow down performance quite a bit. So it's not any crazy hard and fast rules, but like for street lights, try and keep them at least somewhat spaced out, because if they're right on top of each other and those lights are overlapping, that's going to impact performance. Generally speaking, the game's pretty performance easy, but it is possible to make a level that will drag down performance. Okay, so we got all that. Now the last thing we want to cover is AutoMapper tiles, and then we're going to open it up for some question and answer, and then we'll call it for tonight. So go all the way on the bottom of your tiles, and there are a couple of weird categories. Now, Hugh, I don't know if you're ever going to promise as to when you're going to finish out the sentries. That would be a nice gift to our community. In the meantime, the players can just pick and choose some of these Tobruk sentries and then see whether they're armed or not. This is a little bit of a quirk because neither fish nor fowl. These are enemies, but they're placed in the prop tiles because they're totally stationary. And I believe this one works, and the one with the Citadel upper.
Just a quick note. Because of how the memory is allocated, if you place more than 8 on a map, that map will crash as soon as one of those Tobruks sees you. So don't put more than 8.
Yeah, so watch your number
At
of
least
Tobruks. Not only are Tobruks totally busted, and most of them not armed, they will also actively crash your map. So maybe I shouldn't even. So is it Tobruks? A great feature, getting greater all the time. We're going to go all the way down the tile sets to AutoMapper. What's AutoMapper, you say? So these are some. We'll do a little like finish up, right? Like we'll pretend this is the map that, man, we really need to get this into shipping shape and it should look better. So I'm going to go over to player 0, move back checkpoints.
While he's getting that set up, the other thing is that so the black mass, the non-playable space, right? So that ground tile, when you place that ground tile, it tells the editor, or it tells the game that this is not a walkable space. However, that does not mean it's not also blocking projectiles. So if you just have those tiles, say you want to create like a chasm or something, we don't have necessarily the proper visualization for that, but you can shoot across those gaps. And so if you want them, we use kind of a diorama effect. And if you want to employ that, then we have another tile. If you look at any of the existing maps, there's these little like light blue barrier cone things. And what those are invisible high walls so that you can enforce.
On the B wall tile set, it's the second to last. The last one are the checkpoint pylons. We're gonna put them on the prop layer, and then the last one are invisible wall. And
the B walls and the exit gates are the only 2 indestructible assets in the game.
So if you want to make sure your map looks totally like a real map from the developers, this simple, just like we talked about with the camera and cheating out business, The simple rule of thumb is if the wall is facing the camera, it's invisible. If it's the backside, it's visible. So now now doing this, I've totally made sure, and I'm going to do this because it always helps to imply that there's an exit point, right? Doing this now, the player cannot escape. I'm going to go down to the map layer, and I'm going to clear this up so there's nothing out there that looks like there's there. But if you ring this with the invisible barrier, player can escape. Now, you want to say, okay, I want to place the rest of the outer wall map of the map. We're going to go down to the AutoMapper prefab, and what AutoMapper is just an advanced set of rules for placing tiles. So it understands that if it places, oops, see? And if the AutoMapper is not working, you know you're probably on the wrong layer, which I am forever. Go to props. The AutoMapper rules will only work on the proper layer. And I drag this out with shift, and now anytime there is like a turn or an intersection, it'll appropriately place the tile. So you don't have to hunt through and say, oh, where's the end cap for the wall? And then it even has a separate rule for placing things when they're unconnected tiles or disconnected tiles. So it's really nice. So we have several of these AutoMapper tile sets for exactly those kind of things. Pipes, walls, these are things. So now this is how I would go through once I'd finalize a lot of the level layout. I say, okay, this is a back wall, so shift, drag out, and then put a turn in, like the implied turn, but because now this is the forward angle, we're not going to draw that wall. But now over here, this becomes a wall again because it is the back wall again. Turn it. This stays the same. This is a back wall, so we're going to draw that in. Again, you can totally just ring the map. Now these are the only props in the game except for the escape ship itself and the gates. B-walls, gates, escape ship are the only truly indestructible props in the game. So you have that as a note. You can always open up, the different maps to see how they're laid out in terms of, how we do things to kind of get a sense of what should or should not be. But here, this is finished as far as the outer wall. This is how a proper map that ever appears in the game. That's how the outer gate would be taken care of. I'm gonna go ahead and erase these toadbrooks. They're shameful memory from our systems. It's not really a Brigador map without a giant death trap of exploding big pipes. This is a great set because the AutoMapper is cool because if you don't like the tile it plays, you can click on it again and it'll like somewhat randomize it. So it's really nice for sort of tabbing through. And as you can imagine, you can build out a level quite fast with the combination of some of these tools. So AutoMapper, I'm going to go back over to Forest, which is next to Farmstead. And then turn on the randomize again. And of course, we get some nice. But again, even though we've, like a diorama, have cut out this wall, it doesn't stop us from drawing in all this. But again, notice that if I do that, there is no implied movement to be had by the player around the city block. So again, just be mindful of some of these sort of things. So I can do this, and then, oh, suddenly this gets a little sparse because of the sort of the diorama effect. And it's implied. It's like, oh, that's a way around it for the player. I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit easier. So already, and of course we can go back in, draw our roads more properly, add a little more detail, but you can see this is already starting to look like a true play space. It does not take much for it to look like a real level. And just go in and keep adding your minis, get your blocks in, get the enemies in there, and then just start adding up all the lights and the tiny minis. You're not really a full-fledged Brigador until you play Punt the Gas Station, at least half the other times. Absolutely. And yeah, make sure you add a gas station. The gas station is on the buildings tile. Just secretly down there, waiting, lingering just like it does in the game. So this is definitely a true Brigador map now. We've got a hideous giant pile of exploding pipes and a gas station to lay in wait. Now, technically, of course, all the maps we tried to build, we always have all depots, all kinds of depots, at least one orbital gun, and then substations and comm stations. So we go to, not battery, it's in depot. So on depot, which is one of the first other prop layers, you'll also notice something that has never been used in the game but still totally works: an all ammo station. It's a white ammo station. You can totally, we've kept it in purposefully for, well, there's actually two things. There's a flame depot, totally useless. Nothing uses flame ammo. Sorry. Not
well,
this game.
Although we do still have the data files for them in the game.
We'll talk about that on modding at some other time. So you can totally use all ammo depots, the white ones, but otherwise conventionally, of course, you can do whatever you want. It's your world, baby. But conventionally, you have at least one of each kind of depot, and at least one comm station, and at least one substation. Substations being the ones, if you knock them out, the lights go out in the level. So
if you spawn a level with no comm station, then the AI defaults to the destroyed comm station behavior. So if you want delayed unit responses from spotters, then just don't have a comm station. And with the power stations, if there's no power station or power substation, then you can never permanently lower panic walls if you have them.
Bingo.
So that's a thing where it's like, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just something to keep in mind.
Another great thing we can do with our automapper is panic walls. There are two weird colored panic walls, for automapper prefabs. I'll drag this over, and we have it already. You don't have to adjust your opacity of your layer settings just because of the way that they're authored. We just made the tiles for the editor transparent just to make life easier. This set is the blue set in the automapper is starts normally, which is to say, if the alarm goes off, these panic walls go up. But as you see in many maps, we go to the other panic wall set and place place the blue style. Those will be up from the start of the map. So we will show you there briefly. Look what a totally actual game we've built, or a total actual real map we've built. So notice that this set of panic walls still down, but this starts up by default. So you can do a lot of fun stuff. You don't have to like come up with some tricky way to try and trick the player into starting the alarm off just because you want a network of panic walls. You can have them up by default if you use the appropriate set. And now I'm going to show off just one of these other little good tricks, which is you can overlap tiles of overlap props of different kinds.
Double stacking.
Double stacking is a really nice visual polish thing, and also can have gameplay implications. So let's go to crane. And now, because if I go on prop layer, it's just going to overwrite that. Whatchamacallit, Hesco Bastion. But if I go to traps, which is normally reserved only for mud and train traction stuff, but if I place it in traps, it looks weird here, but don't worry, the engine will understand what's happening here. And also, traps layer is what we use for this thing. So if you go to, is it B-wall? It's on exit, I think. Exits. So there's an exits tile set, which is how you place these gates. Gates will only drop once at least one of the objectives has been accomplished. But you have these arrows and these exits. I'm going to turn off randomize. And it's frankly really low tech. You just place them over the same tiles as the gates, so that when the gates are down, we don't have any magic fancy thing that hides these graphics. The graphics are always displayed. They're just hidden by the gates when the gates are up. So if you want to make your game look more like a real Brigador level, you make sure to place those exits. So F4. Oh no, there's the exit. No, it's not. Ha ha ha. And now we also see the weird aspect, and it doesn't look glitchy or weird or anything, but that crane is overlapped on the Hesco Bastion and partially overlapped on that depot, which is now a objective, which makes more sense. Let's wander around our newly created tiny map. We've angered the Addixes with blowing up their favorite line of explosive pipes. Comm tower. And now the emergency backup lights has turned on for the gas station. Haha, you have no power over me. Alright. There we go. So unless there's anything else. Oh, automapper, there are two kinds of automapper. And this has particular value for certain things. So I'm gonna go in and delete that with my marquee tool. Now the marquee tool is interesting because even though you can, with the stamp brush picked, you can do copy paste, but it's kind of like copy paste light. Especially if you want to do a more serious copy and paste, use the proper marquee tile tool. Control C, Control V. That's the only one that will carry if you have multiple levels open and you want to like grab a cool set that you see in another level, or like you've built a part from another level and you want to bring it over to another level. You can't just do the thing with you can't just do the stamp brush thing. Like, even though I've selected these and I can move it around and stamp them down in this level, the second I open up another level editor or another level file, that won't transfer over. I have to use this special marquee tool. Copy, paste, and then I hit paste, and that'll show up there. Okay, the other last thing, the very last tile tab, you have automapper, which is just this, automatic set of rule placement sort of stuff. And there's automapper prefabs, which is almost exclusively used for the suburban houses, just because there's. Oh, I somehow managed to do a copy of the prop layer, which is something you should not do because that would just, I think, double the placement of everything. But with props layers selected, I go and I get a nice suburban house, and that's going to place it combined with placing the appropriate ground tiles underneath it as well, which is super, super useful. I'm going to go down to tile.
The green prefabs are for the map layer.
Yes, you see over here there are a couple of green, and that's, again, still largely for the purposes of the suburban style maps. Doot. Now, not real good looking, but you see how fast it is too. We didn't come up with many more things that really needed this kind of placement than the houses, but the houses absolutely need it. So if you want to build your suburban app, that's how you're gonna do it. Okay, I think that's most of what you need covered, at least on the basics. We'll probably do a follow-up stream that covers a little bit more, probably over the theory, but also more advanced techniques and approaches for overall layout, guiding the player, flow, designing for encounters, actual, like what makes for a good firefight, versus a cheap one or whatever. We'll do that some other time, but for now, we're going to open this up for questions. If anyone is having a particular problem they got their editor open and they're trying stuff out and they just can't figure something out or something doesn't make a lot of sense, please let me know in the chat right now.
Also, while we're waiting for that, Jack, why don't you just open up a fully fleshed out level and just kind of look around and see some of the stuff that's on there.
Let's do that.
Might I suggest St. Martin's Spaceport is a very well-appointed map.
This guy, he spent 3 years of his life on a single map. Never leaves it down. It took him a long time to build this map. And it looks fabulous, let's be honest. You can see how old it is because it's prior to us having a separate layer conventionally for lights and scenery. They're all uncomfortably meshed into one layer.
Turn off the props and traps layer just to show the density of scenery around.
Oh, sure. I'll even turn off the bottom map. So this is only decorative props and scenery. Yeah, he did a lot of work. There's a lot of work. Visually, it's so high sugary. Yeah, he did a lot of work here.
But that also gives you an idea of the kind of density you can put into these levels.
And it's not going to hurt.
Just fine.
Not going to hurt your game at all. You just have to watch a little more of, like, there is actually an upper limit for a number of certain kinds of tiles you can place. I got close to it on the outpost level. I can't remember the name of it right now, but the one that is the big old cornfield, and they've smooshed down the cornfield and built like a military outpost in the middle of it, and it's just a little too big, frankly. That, I think I had to take out some of the mud and corn tiles because there were just simply too many of them. That'll give you a sense of how big you need to make and how many tiles you need to cram in before it becomes a problem for the editor. It can really take a lot. Probably want to play test with your friends, or if you got one friend with like the really bad computer, let him know. He's like, I can't run it. You're like, sucks. You suck. Tell your friends they suck. That's the real takeaway tonight. Their computer sucks anyway. Yeah. Anyone have any questions? I would appreciate. Oh, this hasn't. Hugh, did you update the new exploding truck into this mod set?
Oh, shooby dooby. I will do that.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'll update the tile assets.
Because in the coming patch, I've remade this. This was never intended to be an explosive truck. I've remade the asset to look more like an explosive truck. Oh no, Commander says it isn't his. So it's
no. It shows in game, but not in the level editor.
Commander,
really?
yeah, Commander says.
Oh, maybe I did.
I probably didn't even overwrite my own. Is the problem? So.
Fool.
You fool. Yeah. Any other questions?
Huh, look at me. So diligent.
Little thought process here. So, like we were talking about, I mean, this looks like crazy detailed, but that's kind of how those neon prop lights were designed for. They're meant to like have this sense of, oh my gosh, there's so much detail. But this is actually really simple work.
It's actually just the crazy detail work of Jack's artwork.
You got it.
He did all the work for you.
What can I say? I want you to profit. I want you to prosper. Go and build maps. Make great maps. Juice by Tappy. Oh, well, he says it's there, and there it is. So if there are not any questions, we're going to wrap this up. But I know you know how to fish. Go nuts. Yeah. Well, again, we'll probably just do another follow-up stream about kind of some of the tips for setting up layouts. And of course, some of these particular props are some are more quirky than others, and some of you'll discover. Like for example, all the train props are floating slightly off the ground because they're supposed to go over tracks. So don't put the trains down unless you put down tracks. Is lighting built into the map, or is that part of the loading? Excellent question. That is part of what we'll cover with the advanced class, which is to say each what is it called, Hugh? An overmap file?
Yeah, so the short answer is no, it's separate.
Yeah,
so
it's separate.
You can assign, once you properly integrate your level into the game, you can assign a specific lighting, they're called weather files. You can assign a specific weather file or a set of a set of files that randomly get picked each time that gets loaded. Yeah, there's all kinds of metadata that will get added to the level once you integrate it more properly into the game, as opposed to just building an environment and testing it out by overriding something existing in the game.
So yeah, we'll go over that in the part 2. But you can totally build a map. You don't have to worry about this. It's just a little metadata file that sets all of that extra stuff, which is to say objectives and what lighting file to look for.
Reaniate, so weapon pickups, that's actually deprecated code. We used to, at one point, we'd experimented.
Oh, well, let's read out the question. ModKit has a weapon pickups folder. Can you put weapons pickups in the game to switch guns inside a mission? No. And you can finish with your answer here.
At one point we had a build where you could, and we were experimenting with hot swapping weapons in the mission, or even we had a variant of the game where it was you couldn't reload. You just, when you ran out of ammo for a given weapon, you had to swap out for a new weapon, which had interesting possibilities. It wasn't necessarily better or worse, but the issue we had with it was that it basically rendered the initial decision of your loadout to be moot.
Right. Trivial.
And that was something we had spent a lot of time on, and we wanted that to be an important part of your kind of identification with the vehicle and the characters. So, yeah, I mean, at some point, maybe, I don't know if that's, I'm not a programmer, so I don't know if that stuff's still floating around in there, but functionally speaking, we called them pickups just because at one point they could be picked up, but that just refers to the art assets for the gun barrels that you see on the vehicles in the game.
Oh! Forgot. The very last cherry on top is, of course, placing civilians. So go to the civilians layer, the final top objects layer, go to the civilians palette, and there are a couple of different ones, there are a couple of them marked as targets in order for certain specific setups, like if you're running an auditor run, or a couple of the, maybe one or two of the campaign maps, maybe just one campaign map. But otherwise, you just click that little civilian guy and make sure we're on place object, and then just sprinkle those poor little SOBs through your world. Talk about environmental storytelling. You're like, man, they just love calm towers. That's it. That's my environmental story told.
I have a couple of favorites, but Jack, if you can load up level suburbs real quick.
What's your favorite outstanding part of the bar? Oh, I see. Squish, squish.
So just do it in game. Yeah.
What load?
The civilians. The suburbs level. You can just use the level loader to go to it immediately.
Yeah, I've like almost never used this, so this is new to me too. Where's the level loader?
Hit
Level
F1,
select?
go to level select, yeah, and just set default settings.
Sure.
It's just,
Suburbs
yeah,
are one?
Yeah.
What do you mean default? As in unit objective, boss objective, all those? Or what?
Yeah. Don't just set gang. So right now gang is none. So this is a quick tutorial for just custom loading levels. So when you pick a level, then you select the gang is what enemy units spawn in. So what spawn list is used. So it doesn't matter, since this being a mission level, it doesn't use any spawn list spawns. So whatever you pick here doesn't actually make a difference. And then the toggles for shuffle defaults is self-explanatory. Unit objective, boss objective, and map prop objective is so that when you load that level, what is required for the level to be completed. If whichever one is toggled is what's required to be done. If all three are toggled, it means all three have to be done. If none are toggled, it means completing one of any of the three is sufficient. And then the strength is what set of the spawn list, that you run. And then you hit load, and then the map will load. But yeah, if you go in suburbs, if you go to the southeast side, so if you spawn...
I'm gonna turn on the various props and quiet mode.
Yeah. Invisibility makes you invisible. Deafness means enemies can't hear you. But yeah, go like the southeast side. There's a house that has some cones. Yeah, you're at it. The training cones for some.
Here's another little help. Hit
drills.
hack if you go to pack file, then type in global pack file tab. Go to global data. Now we go to data editor. And we go down to with the global. Don't be careful about messing around with this file. Don't save your changes. You can change your zoom in the game. It actually exists. So, Hugh, describe your favorite scene here.
Yeah, so you can see there's you've got the two baskets, and that's actually the way those cones are set up is an established shooting and passing drill for basketball. And you've got the bins, trash bins around the side, and then like equipment bins near the hoop. And it's you've got this big duplex. It's obviously a very affluent family, but it was just a very human little detail that I really enjoyed putting in. And it was like putting in those kinds of things when I was building the maps kind of helped contextualize the levels we were building and to make them feel to me like a human place as opposed to purely just a level. Because obviously a level its first role is to be a fun level to play. But then beyond that, I wanted to have it, I wanted to have these little details to help guide me in doing the aesthetic part of the level, but also to kind of have those little details in there. There's even the little plastic chair for old man watching the kid train.
Right there, yeah. And also when you're in dev mode and hit tab, it'll do a zoom out the map. We thought about having this retained in the playable version of the game, but it turns out it kind of defeats the entire balance of the game if you can see exactly where everyone is. And there are also some performance issues, so you can still enjoy it in developer mode.
It also allows you to completely cheat with weapons and artillery, because we didn't want to set artificial caps for weapon range.
Yeah.
And that's kind of soft caps just by trajectory. But yeah.
Okay. Any other? Let's see. Ratha Winter. Is there any ability to implement custom objectives such as the occupy a specific area for a time frame or protect, destroy a very specific unit? Unit's places obviously on the map. No. We maybe foolhardily thought what we had was enough, and there is no support nor any particular plan for supporting that in the future. So the 3 objective types, all destructive, are what you have available. How about spawning enemies after a condition is met? That is also a entirely kind of philosophical point on our end. Just didn't want to have the whole can of worms of what it is like when enemies come out of nothing. So it's not possible. All the enemies that are on a map are there at the beginning, so there's no extra spawning. So we also have no contingency or no ability to load extra. There's no like if-then statements for scripting. In fact, there's basically no scripting whatsoever. Something else we'll cover on the advanced tutorial session, which is the placement of text tutorial boxes. That's how we achieved the Great Leader is Dead, here's your contract in the intro, the text on the screen. But it's a very limited utility for the most part. There is no real scripting. There's just placement, which is, again, something that is sort of an ideological purity, but also just trying to make sure that the game was appropriately scoped, which we failed at miserably in other aspects, but we've at least got done for that aspect of level creation. Because there's certainly enough, pieces to put together out of what we have done in the game to make a lot of different missions, and we continue to make those missions. So, we have another. Yes, is the robot voice triggers also a placement? Yes, that's an aspect of what are called the text trigger. The only triggers in the game are text trigger, which is a simple radius. If you step inside that radius, it displays that text and/or can play a sound file. Real quick, just to recap, what's the level naming scheme? Level _ blank is for freelance levels. M level, which is to say mission level _ blank, is the nomenclature for campaign maps. That's the only distinction we've made. M level for missions in the campaign, level _ blank is for freelance. Yes, and Ian Noon is correct. We've got a great little trick. We've done our own version of monster closets, but we've still never spawned in enemies. All right. Well, I think that covers it for tonight. Old Dad here can actually go to bed at a reasonable time as well. Wonders never cease. It's been a lot of fun. I know we haven't streamed in a very long time, but we're hard at work trying to get a demo up for our second game. More info on that soon. We do have, of course, the mod kit now available, so people can make and trade maps, which is great. They can make their own mods. We can actually really have access to almost all the tools, except for the sprite stuff, which I may also cover. We also release and then cover in another tutorial, which is going to be quite a bit longer. But you can make your own maps, and you can really drastically change the very essential nature of the game. Very early on, when we were still having trouble kind of grappling with what was this game, how is it going to play, what relative speeds should we do, this kind of thing, we actually trained a couple of our friends on how the game was built, how you edited some of these files, and we were like, show us your version. And it was really great because some of the stuff that they came up we thought was really great, and there was a sort of a path not taken, which was the much more like slugging it out, slower, tactical, like tank combat game that in another world, in another timeline, we probably would have made. Maybe we still make it someday. I don't know. But the potential to make that kind of game is totally still within Brigador. And if you want to make like a cool, crazy tank combat game that's real like slow and tactical, I'm just gonna put it out there that I've played that game already. This game was that game for a brief period. Part of the reason we didn't go for it is less likely to appeal to a broader audience, and something the engine did well is put a lot of stuff on screen. So if we're suddenly duking it out with just a couple of tanks, that's not taking advantage of what the engine did well. So, but for a mod, seems like something that would be a lot of fun, I think. So we'll cover some more in an advanced class, but otherwise we're going to put this up on YouTube, so for other people who couldn't make it. Thank you everyone who did make it. Thank you for the questions, and I hope this has been informative. But otherwise, okay, it was a bit late to come to stream. Where do I find the map editor? Just scroll up just a, well, we'll have it pasted here. Yeah, what he's saying. He will paste you the relevant information, but this will be mirrored up shortly not shortly. In a couple of days, I'll put it up on YouTube. So if you just missed this, it'll be available shortly. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night. And I hope to see some of your custom levels and mods pretty soon, because I know you got it in you.
We're not announcing anything official yet, but we probably might do something with like some good community maps that people make, or who knows?
Yeah.
Wink, 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 wink.
Yeah, depending on what we get, depending on how things go, we would love to showcase what our community is capable of. So,
also, we'll be using these same tools for the next game.
Yes, this is a very important detail. So maybe you're like, timing's not great. It's not exactly striking while the iron's hot there, boys. You are totally correct. However, this is the set of tools, like, without really any modification. This is exactly the suite of tools we'll be using to build our second game. So if you want to be the guy that when that game comes out, day one is able to make a totally awesome level for it because you know the tools, that's going to be possible if you build Brigador levels. So just putting that out there for your consideration. All right, we will adjourn, and we'll follow this up with a sort of a more advanced, especially, I know people will come up with more questions once they've just had time to tinker with the editor. So, and there's tons of little tips and tricks, and sort of the philosophy of building out levels is another aspect that I only covered a little bit of this time around that we can cover more of. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming, and we'll see you again sometime next week for the advanced class. So happy mapping. Good night. Lore alert. Good night.
Oh, it's pretty good.